Hello, my dear friends. Welcome back. Come in, sit down. I'm very glad you're here tonight. If you ever travel to the Swiss city of Lucerne, there is a place I want you to find. It is a short walk from the old town, tucked into a natural alcove carved into a sandstone cliff face. A small reflecting pond sits in front of it. Trees frame the rock, and in the stone, someone has carved a lion. The lion is dying. A broken spear pierces his side. His great body is slowly sinking, but his paw, even in death, rests protectively on a shield bearing the fleur-de-lis of the French monarchy. He is not letting go, even now. Even at the end, above the lion, carved into the rock, is a Latin inscription, Helvetiorum fidei ac virtuti, to the loyalty and bravery of the Swiss. Mark Twain came to see this lion in 1880. He had seen a great deal of the world by then. He had no shortage of words for anything. But when he stood in front of this sculpture, what he wrote was simply this: the most mournful and moving piece of stone in the world. Tonight I want to tell you why. To understand this story, you have to understand something about Switzerland that most people don't think about when they picture that country. Today we think of Switzerland, and we think of watches, chocolate, banking, pristine mountains, perfect order. A country of quiet, prosperous precision. But for most of Swiss history, it was something very different. The Alps are beautiful. They are not farmable. The mountain valleys of Switzerland could barely sustain the people who lived in them. There was no trade route that made anyone rich. There was no natural resource that could be exported. There was no easy way to make a living. What the Swiss did have was their young men. And their young men, generation after generation, had learned to fight. Swiss infantry became the most feared military force in Europe in the 15th and 16th centuries. Their discipline, their formation, fighting, their absolute refusal to break ranks under pressure. These things made them legendary on battlefields, from Italy to France to the Netherlands. And so the cantons of Switzerland began to do what you do when you have one thing of value to offer a world that wants it. They exported their soldiers. It was not glamorous. A young man from a mountain village, with no inheritance to speak of, and a family depending on him, could leave home and return with enough money to feed people through the winter. His contract was his honor. His reputation was the only thing he had. And Swiss soldiers became known, above all other things, for keeping their word. This is the world that produced the men who stood at the Tuileries Palace on August 10th, 1792. The Swiss Guards had served the French royal household since 1616, when a formal treaty bound them to protect the French crown. Their oath was not to France. It was not to a government or a revolution or an idea. It was to the person of the king, to Louis XVI himself. A personal oath, given by men who understood that a promise was not a promise, if it only held when convenient. On the morning of August 10th, 1792, Paris was on the edge of something terrible. 20,000 armed revolutionaries carrying muskets, sabers, pikes, daggers, and iron bars were marching toward the Tuileries Palace. Inside the palace, roughly 900 Swiss guards stood at their posts. The king looked out at the crowd. He was not a cruel man or a stupid one. He could count. He could see what was coming. He made a decision that he believed was merciful, and that would haunt the rest of his short life. He ordered the Swiss guards to lay down their arms. He was asking them to stand down, to live, to go home. And here is the moment, my friends, that I want you to hold. Many of the Swiss guards refused, not out of bloodlust, not out of politics, not because they had any personal quarrel with the people coming through those gates. These were farmers' sons from the Alps. They had no opinion about the French Revolution. They had no stake in the argument between the monarchy and the republic. Many of them had probably never met Louis XVI in person, had never spoken to him, would never have encountered him in any other life. But they had given an oath. And to a Swiss soldier of that era, an oath was not something you put down when the circumstances changed. It was the only currency that mattered. It was the reason anyone would hire you. It was the reason your family could eat. The fighting was desperate and brutal. The Swiss guards used their muskets and bayonets and held the courtyards of the palace against a mob that outnumbered them by more than 20 to 1. Louis XVI's confused and contradictory orders created chaos. Some guards put down their arms in surrender and were killed anyway. Others fought on. By the end of the day, approximately 600 Swiss guards were dead. Many of them were killed after they had already surrendered. Standing somewhere in the crowd that day, watching it all, was a 23-year-old Corsican military officer named Napoleon Bonaparte. He observed the massacre from the street. He later said that what he saw, the discipline of the Swiss guards, the savagery of what was done to them, never left him. The heads of the guards were put on pikes in the streets of Paris. One Swiss officer was not there that day. Captain Karl Pfeiffer von Alteshoffen was on leave when the massacre happened. He survived because of a coincidence of timing, a scheduled absence that had nothing to do with choice or courage. When he heard what had happened to his comrades, he felt something that never went away. 28 years later, he commissioned a monument. He hired the Danish sculptor Bertel Thorvaldsen to design it, and a craftsman named Lucas Ahorn to carve it. From the natural sandstone of a cliff face near Lucerne, the work was completed in 1821. A dying lion, a broken spear, a shield he will not release even in death, and the inscription, "To the loyalty and bravery of the Swiss." Below the lion, carved into the stone, are the names of the officers who died. Not kings, not generals, not men of power. Men from mountain villages who had given their word and kept it. Now, my friends, I want to tell you something that most people who visit the Lion Monument don't know. Or rather, something that gives this story a second chapter. The Swiss guards at the Tuileries were not the first Swiss soldiers to die, protecting someone else's leader in a moment of crisis. Nearly 3 centuries earlier, in 1527, the forces of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V sacked Rome in one of the most brutal events of the Renaissance. The Pope at the time, Clement VII, needed to escape through a secret passage, the Passetto di Borgo, that connected the Vatican to the Castel Sant'Angelo. As the Pope fled, 147 Swiss guards formed a rear guard in St. Peter's Square to hold off the attacking army. Of the 189 Swiss guards who fought that day, 147 were killed. They died on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica, buying the minutes the Pope needed to reach safety. Pope Julius II had established the Swiss Guard at the Vatican in 1506. After 1527, no one ever seriously questioned why the Pope's personal guard should be Swiss. They had answered that question in St. Peter's Square. They answer it still. Today, the Pontifical Swiss Guard stands at the gates of the Vatican. They wear uniforms Renaissance in design, brilliant in color, that are said to have been inspired by Michelangelo. They are still Swiss. They are still there. They are still keeping the same oath. My dear friends, what moves me most about this story is not the heroism of it, though it is genuinely heroic. It is the ordinariness of these men. They were not crusaders dying for a cause they believed in with their whole souls. They were young men from poor mountain villages who had one skill and one reputation, and they had staked everything on a word given. They had no quarrel with the mob at the Tuileries, no strong opinion about the revolution. And when the man they had sworn to protect told them to go home, to save themselves, they looked at the crowd coming through the gates and chose to stay anyway. Not because they were ordered to. He had ordered them not to. They stayed because of something older and quieter than any order. Something about who they had decided to be. There is a lion in Lucerne that has been dying for 200 years. His paw rests on a shield that no longer needs protecting. The king is long gone. The monarchy is long gone. The revolution that killed these men has passed into history. But the lion holds on, and the inscription remains, "To the loyalty and bravery of the Swiss." Mark Twain was right. Thank you so much for spending this evening with me, my dear friends. Until next time, keep your word. That is always enough. Good night.